tell you about a bishop. This friend of mine went to Texas, and a friend loaned the car. And while he was being driven from one city to another, the chauffeur kept addressing him as, "Yes, Rose." "No, Rose." "That's right, Rose." And finally the bishop said, "I'm a bit curious. Why do you call me Rose?" He said, "That's the way the madam told me to address you." "No," said the bishop, "it could not possibly have been that." "Well, what did he say?" He said, "You should say either Your Excellency or Your Grace." "Oh, Grace, Grace, Rose, Rose. I knew it was a lady's name." Tonight we're going to tell you about Christmas. Just suppose that you came into a city a perfect stranger, and you saw many people walking down the street, hilarious and gay and happy and exchanging gifts and greetings with one another and showing every manifestation of affection. And you found no apparent reason for it. You would wonder if they were out of their heads. At this time everyone is happy. I wonder if they know why they're happy. It has every aspect of being a marriage. So we shall tell you the story of Christmas in terms of dolls. Yes, dolls. But before we show you the dolls, I must tell you something about Christmas in the world and what it has done to the world. Christmas has done, first of all, something to time. And then something to space. And finally, to the missing link. First of all, Christmas did something to time. Everyone is born in a certain era of time, save one. When eternity came to this earth and established his beachhead in Bethlehem, time was struck with such a terrific impact that it was split in two. That is why all the periods of history are divided since the first Christmas into the period of before Christ and after Christ, Anno Domini, the year of our Lord. And even the communists who deny God and are antichrists, they nevertheless have to date all of their newspapers as 1,953 years after his birth. And then space, too, was turned upside down. The Greeks used to believe that their gods were dwelling on Olympian heights, and that worried them to some extent. Because if God is way up there, what does he know about our sufferings? They wanted a God who was down in the dust of human lives. God that was way up there, what did he know about being a refugee? Or being homeless? Was he ever betrayed? Did he ever suffer? Did he ever come close to death? And when the Son of God was born under the floor of the world, he shook the foundations of the world and turned space upside down. For up until then, mothers always used to say, as they held children in their arms, heaven is way, way up there. But the day that this woman held a babe in her arms, it was true to say that she looked down to heaven. And finally, the missing link is related to Christmas. During the last 100 years, men have been concerned about finding their relationship to the beast. And it is during that period of time that man has most acted like a beast. Christmas is the discovery of the missing link. Not the link that binds a man to the beast, but the link that binds man to God. And that divine babe is the real caveman, born in the cave of Bethlehem. And the light that is shining in his eyes is not that of a beast coming to the dawn of reason, but the light of a God coming to the darkness of men. And his name is not Piltdown. His name is Christ, for he is the link, being God and man, between both. For life, we discover now, is not a push from below, but a gift from above. Such is Christmas in relationship to history. Now, I'm going to explain it to you in terms. This has a hole in its head. It's very open-minded. And this one was asked a question about whether or not he was a loyal American, that he hid behind the Fifth Amendment and lost his head to Russia. This is the only boy in the lot. He asked for a woman's hand and found the rest of his life he was under her thumb. Well, these were the broken dolls, and the little girl was very much concerned with the broken dolls, and she asked the broken dolls if they would like to be mended. And they were rather indifferent to it, and then she said, well, how would you like to become a little girl? You have only sawdust brains, and you've got just a rag heart. You have no life in you. Wouldn't you like to be alive just as I am? And the little doll said, first of all, how do we know there's any such thing as a life beyond us? We only know sawdust. And then the doll said, that means we'd have to get cleaned up, doesn't it? And we like to be dirty. So the little girl was very much concerned as to what she could do to induce the dolls to become little girls. And she heard of a lady that could make the most beautiful doll that ever lived, though she'd never made a doll. And the little girl, whose name was Gundy, sent an angel to this beautiful lady and asked her to make a doll. And the little girl, in order to teach the dolls what they should be, became a live doll, and this is the little girl. And the little girl told the dolls that if they would become alive like she was, they could think and they would know things that they never knew before, and they would also love one another. And she did everything she could to induce the dolls, to become little girls. And some of the little dolls did consent to be little girls, and then the others went off to the psychiatrist. Now to make the application. These dolls here represent human nature. Battered and weary, worn, full of anxieties and fears, have some knowledge but is very incomplete, have an aspiration for goodness, but there still does not seem to be enough inner power to implement that desire. And then, too, there's a kind of a drag toward evil. And God wants to know if they would like to become not just creatures, but His children. And just as the dolls became little girls so that they were alive with the life of a human being, so God asked that man become a child of God. And He did not want to destroy human freedom. So what He did was to come to this earth as a man. He went to the most beautiful woman who ever lived, And through an angel said to her, "Will you give me a man?" And the woman said, "Fiat, be it done." And just as the little girl had gone to a great lady and asked to become a doll, so that she had within herself her own human nature and her own human personality, and with it the nature of the doll, so too God asked this woman to give him a man, so that in the person of Christ there was the nature of a man, there was the nature of God. They were united in the person of God. Just as imperfectly I have a body, I have a soul, the nature of each is different, but I'm still one person. And so he came to this earth in order to try to induce us, in order to change our nature, to be more than we are. He pointed to all creation that he had made. And he said here, for example, chemicals are becoming plants, and plants are becoming animals, and animals are being transformed into man. Why should not man be transformed into something divine? Not that man would ever be as divine as he is, but man could in some way share his nature, and then have added to his human reason light that transcended human reason, namely the light of faith, and then have added to his will strength and an energy and a power that was not of earth, that would enable him to do the things that were good and righteous. Therefore, you see, when he came to this earth, it was not to give us a code, it was not to give us a law, it was not to have some secretaries write books that we might read and carry about with us, merely as we might carry about Plato or Socrates. It was rather that we might be infected with his divine life, not just be men, but children of God. And when finally eternity came to time and housed himself in that flesh ciborium of his blessed mother, and remember that at Christmas you cannot separate a babe from a mother. If you do, you will soon separate Christ from Christmas. And he housed himself in his mother. And she sought about for a place where he might be born. And following an edict of Caesar Augustus, she went to the royal city of Bethlehem, for she was of a royal family. And the story simply is, you remember, there was no room in the inn. The Creator came to this earth, and there was no room for him in room for the Maliks, the Bashinskis, no room in the inn. The inn is the gathering place of public opinion. There was no room there. And there in this place, it was called the House of Bread, Beth Lechem in Hebrew. He, the living bread, is laid in the place of food. And the angels speak to the shepherds and say, and this will be to you a sign. A sign of what? Sign that God was on earth in the form of a man. What will be the sign? This will be the sign. A babe wrapped in swaddling clothes and laid in a manger. Omnipotence swathed in the bonds of humanity, eternity and time. Omnipresence in bonds. The bird that built the nest is hatched therein. And there came to the babe shepherds and wise men. Shepherds, those who know they know nothing. Wise men, those who know they do not know everything. Never the man with one book. Never the man who thinks that he knows. The only two who ever find the God-man are the very humble and simple like the shepherds, and the very learned like the wise men. Now that Christmas is on us, the problem that confronts each and every one of us is, what does it profit Christ to be born in Bethlehem 1,000 times unless he's also born in our own hearts? Not everyone wants to be born like the dolls. Not every one of them wanted to be clean. Some of them say they want to have their nature changed. And then the others run off to Freudian psychoanalysts. But those who want their nature changed find themselves living in a different world with a different mind and a different love. And they're so very happy. Do you want to go through life with sawdust brains? With rag hearts? Loveless bodies? That's the challenge of Christmas. It is not something that has happened, it is something that is happening. And hence the great question that we have to ask is, in terms of the doll, is my heart on straight? Is my soul in place? Do I have a love expression on my face? Is my soul full of God's light? Do I look all right? To be taken to the crib on Christmas morn. God love you.
People of all faiths recognize Bishop Fulton J. Sheen as one of the greatest communicators of the 20th century. He was born in El Paso, Illinois, in May of 1896. As a young boy, he knew he wanted to be a priest. He served as an altar boy at St. Mary's Cathedral in Peoria, Illinois. At St. Viator College, his education and debating skills taught him the skills he used throughout his life. His unique ability at being natural and at ease in front of any audience was noted early in his ministry. He was ordained in 1919 and went on to become one of the best-known and greatly loved priests in church history. He wrote 96 books and hundreds of articles and columns. He broadcast numerous radio and TV programs. People from all faiths watched him on television because he spoke to every man. They always waited with joy for his goodbye, his blessing, God love you. It continues to give us joy and memories.
Bye now, and God love you.
Bishop Fulton J. Sheen went to be with the Lord in December of 1979. Fulton J. Sheen, requiescat in pace. It began here, in the upper room, 2,000 years ago. This is my body. This is my blood. Remember me. In a garden he prayed to his Father on a night of betrayal, torture, death, far from Galilee. When taken from his rack of torment, in a borrowed grave he lie. On the third day the angel said, "He has risen. He did not die." After sharing with...
Heard the subject, friends, but it has nothing whatever to do with the telegram about love that was sent by a young man to his girl. And it read, love, 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 love. And the Western Union operator said, you have only 9 words, you're allowed 10 for that price. And he said, well, what can I say? What else? Well, she said, you can put in another love. He said, well, that'd make it sound kind of silly. Our subject, the intimacies of love, does imply some increase of communication of friend with friend. There is a growth in affection, just as, for example, there is a difference between radio, which is sound, television, which is vision, and personal appearance. That also explains too why some are disappointed when they see someone they have seen on television. Not so long ago, I was in a church procession in Brooklyn. I was going into the church, and there was a woman alongside. As I passed by, she said, "Glory be to God, you certainly look much better on television." Well, the 3 intimacies of love we will use later on in reference to the life of our blessed Lord. But the first of the intimacies of love, even in the human order, is speech or hearing. We would never know that anyone loved us unless he told us so. Speech is the summation of a soul. All that it has been, all that it is, and all that it will ever be. We need only hear a person talk and we say, he's a smart man. He's a cruel man. He's a kind man. He has a gentle soul. Somehow or other, character comes out through the barriers of the flesh in words. It is not the most intimate kind of communication that we can have with anyone. Aristotle, the wise Greek philosopher, once said that it was the least of the senses. And he went on to explain why we generally are much more kind to the blind than to the deaf. He said because vision is a more spiritual sense. And we're apt to become more impatient with those who are wanting in hearing. That, at any rate, was his view. But in any case, love begins with a word and with speech. And that is one of the reasons why, when you hear people read long, long discourses, read off teleprompters and so forth, or read speeches that have been done by ghostwriters, you wonder, am I really hearing the heart that talks this or not? So if there therefore is to be any love communicated between God and man, God has to speak. We have to hear. Otherwise, we would never know that he loved us. When did he speak? Turn over the pages of the Old Testament This is the speech of God. There you read, for example, such words as, I will be to you a shepherd, and you will be my sheep. And those that are with young, I will carry. If your sins are as scarlet, they shall be made white as snow. And if they are as red as crimson, they shall be made white as wool. And then not only in the Old Testament, but I think every pagan people on the face of the earth heard in some way the speech of God. Buddha, Confucius, Laozi, all of them in some way communicated some feebler intimacy with the divine. Like the Greek dramatist Sophocles, who yearned for a redeemer. Look not for any end, he said, moreover, to this curse, until some God appears, to accept upon his head the pangs of thy own sins vicarious. And Virgil, about 30 years before Christ was born, in his fourth eclogue said, smile, chaste woman, on thy infant boy, with whom the iron age will pass away, and the golden age on all the earth be born. And finally there did come a time when men heard God in a strange way. One night there rang out over the stillness of an evening breeze, out over the white-chalked hills of Bethlehem, a cry, a gentle cry. The sea did not hear the cry, for the sea was filled with its own voice. The great ones of the earth did not hear the cry, for they could not understand how a child could be greater than a man. Two classes of people heard the cry, shepherds and wise men. Shepherds, those who know they know nothing, and wise men, those who know they do not know everything. Never the man with one book. And they came in response to the cry of a babe. And that babe grew in age and grace and wisdom, and men heard God speaking. They heard him speaking in anger, for example, in righteous indignation, particularly against hypocrisy. When he called the hypocrites a brood of vipers, and then pointing to the tombstones on the other side of the hill, they were whitewashed 3 times a year. And likening them to the hypocrites, he said, you're like these tombs. Outside clean, inside full of dead men's bones. And then they heard his voice too, when he saw a lily, a wild lily of the field. And he was the word-made voice, now spoke and pleaded for trust in divinity as he said, behold the lilies of the field. They toil not, neither do they spin. And yet Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed as one of these. And if God then so clothe the grass of the field, which today is and tomorrow is cast into the oven, how much more you, O ye of little faith? But I suppose that there was no time when men heard the voice of God, when there was a more staggering utterance than the day when someone said to him, thou art not yet 50 years old. Hast thou seen Abraham? And he answered with the casualness with which a man might look over his shoulder, before Abraham began to be, I am. It was Sinai. It was the voice of God on earth. But is that enough? Is any human lover satisfied simply when he hears the voice of the beloved? Some voices please, others do not. And even when they please, they still are unsatisfied. I remember once I was instructing someone in Washington, D.C., and we met in the dining room, and this gentleman said to me, pointing to the parrot, he said, "I have a parrot there." He said that makes queer noises when a certain politician talks. He just doesn't like the sound of his voice. And he said, "As you instruct me, I don't know whether he's going to like yours or not." But he says, "Be prepared for a reaction." So I forgot all about the parrot, and I was talking about the existence of God, and I ended up rather dramatically after 10 or 15 minutes, and I said, "Therefore, God exists." And the parrot said, "Oh, boy." So there has to be some other intimacy of love besides hearing, and that is vision. We want to see the flash of an eye, the earnestness of a visage. We want to see the words of love born on human lips. Human love demands this.